Hey, my name's Ian Begley. You're watching the NBA Exchange with Dexter Henry.
Hey everybody, welcome to the NBA Exchange. I'm your host, Dexter Henry. Glad to have you back with us after another week. Exciting weekend of NBA basketball. Talked about on Friday, LeBron is back. The Bulls are looking good. We're going to get to them later in the week, which is rather interesting. Some teams streaking that we did not think were going to be streaking, like the Houston Rockets. The Suns' winning streak is over, ended on Friday night at the hand of the Golden State Warriors. So much to talk about. But this episode, we're going to talk about the Brooklyn Nets a lot. We spoke about them a bit last week with my man Gerard Hector. We are going to talk to them about that again, talk to you guys about the Nets again. And I'm so excited to do it because, as many of you guys know, watch this, for a couple of years, early in the part of the last decade, I worked for Nets Daily. Loved my time working there, did video for them, my man Tom Lorenzo, Bob Windrum, the whole crew, and doing that. And then also just interacting with the great fans of Nets Daily. One of, if not I call it the best SB Nation fan site for sure. So I had to bring somebody on from Nets Daily. My man, Chris Milholen. He is one of the staff writers at Nets Daily. He is very plugged into the Nets, knows everything that's going on. Chris, what's going on, my man? How you doing?
Dexter, what's up, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Good to see you. And I'm really glad to see you because I've actually seen you in person a couple of times this year. We got to see each other at a couple of Nets events, so that has been good for sure. So we always get to do that. But we got to talk about the Nets, okay?
Let's do it.
Interesting time for the Nets. They are 16-7. They are atop the Eastern Conference. However, I think a lot of people around many circles in the NBA, shows like this, been a little bit disappointed with the Nets. What is the state of the Brooklyn Nets right now? How's the fan base feeling? How are you feeling covering the team? What's the state of the Brooklyn Nets?
Well, I guess you could say how the team feels and how the fan base feels are two different sides of the spectrum,
Yes.
right? Because we with like a little, like you were talking about a little off air, we were talking about it, right? The Nets are on top of the Eastern Conference, right? And that could be all. That's glory. That's wonderful. That's kind of where they wanted to be. They're working on their defense. They've always been kind of preaching their defensive improvement over these past stretch of games. And now they're sitting on top of the East with it's not a flimsy lead, but it's somewhat commanding, I guess you could say. They've been at that top for a while now. But at the same time, there's plenty of red flags, I guess you could say, to go around. Their record against above 500 teams, their record against the Eastern Conference seeds 2-5 I think it's 1-5 or 2-4 right now. And then at the end of the day, you also have Harden, which I can imagine we're going to talk about as well. So, there's a lot of ifs, ands, what ifs, those type of things. What if Harden comes back? You have all those little factors that go in between and kind of fill in those holes. But at the end of the day, where this team's standing is, they're on top of the East right now, and they're still forming that continuity and connectivity with each other.
Right. It's still early, even though people have talked about it. And we'll get into more of that about what you think they actually are right now. But you brought up James Harden. We got to talk about James Harden here. His play has been inconsistent. Some day games he's looked really good. We saw this against the Knicks last week. And then against the Bulls, he doesn't look so good the other day when the Nets take a loss to the Chicago Bulls. What do you think was going on with James Harden? And I think it's imperative for him to improve his play and look more like closer to the former MVP that we've seen. What have you made of the play being up and down for James Harden this season?
It was interesting because what was it? It was against the Suns, I believe it was. After the game, he was talking. So I think it was Greg. Greg asked him, he's like, "Hey, are you having a little bit of trouble with your role? Like finding him? When do you want to score? When do you want to facilitate? Mostly, what part of your game do you really want to use to dominate that certain game?" Because as Harden's one of those players that reads the game as it goes on. He doesn't go in knowing, "Hey, I got to score this game," or "Hey, I got to facilitate this game." He kind of delivers based on whatever the defense gives him, right, or whatever the game gives him. So when you saw Harden talk about his role, it was more so kind of, he was frustrated. He was like, "I'm still trying to figure this out." He goes, "I'm still trying to figure out when to score, when to facilitate." And he kind of dropped in there that, hey, it's the Kyrie Irving absence that's kind of overlapping this whole entire, I guess you could say, this whole bubble of his play, right? Because that's where it comes down to, because when the Nets had to replace Kyrie Irving, it wasn't going to be by individual or by just Harden or KD, just by them kind of substituting that. It's going to have to come by a whole committee of group, right? So last night 2 nights ago now with the Chicago loss, Harden took responsibility for it, because during that game, we saw the game, he missed a lot of easy ones at the rim. His shots weren't falling. The turnovers were pretty good overall, with the team, and especially how they average. But it was just the kind of, his shots weren't going in. He was just trying to really just shoot himself out of his rhythm, or get himself into a rhythm, kind of just kept shooting, trying to find something. And after the game, he took responsibility for the loss. Kevin Durant came back and said, hey, if I even made more shots, I would have taken more responsibility off James Harden. So, and then Paul Millsap kind of went in and became the messenger of the whole thing and was like, hey, it's a team game. It's not going to be on one certain player. But, overall, I'm kind of a big believer in this, more so. Okay, these early games, the Nets only need James Harden to really show himself in the playoffs. That's when they really need him at his best, right? But at the same time, he's on a contract year, which we all know. Mm-hmm. And when you see this inconsistent play of him scoring, okay, he's having 30-point games, he's shooting really well, and then he's got other games where he's got double-digit turnovers and 11 assists, but he's only got 8 points on 14 of something like 27 shooting, right? There's going to be those type of games in between, but overall, he's been on a little bit of a flow, I guess you could say, kind of just getting his legs back and moving better, which I've noticed, at least with his mobility. But overall, it's going to be one of those things that could really keep an eye on to see if he could really just get into a rhythm and get out of this kind of inconsistent funk that he's in.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if he can do that, especially with Kyrie out. And to that point you brought up about KD talking about that he needs to do more. I say, what more can KD do, Chris? He's been doing a lot. He's been shouldering the load. And I look at this, and I think Nets fans do this too, and I see this on Twitter talking to the Nets fans. You got to be a little bit worried about KD, right? And all that he's doing offensively. He's playing at an MVP level. But do you think there's too much placed on KD with Harden's inconsistency?
I think it's definitely worrisome that KD's playing a lot of minutes and doing this type, and mostly managing this many duties to keep the Nets ship afloat. I think that it's definitely concerning, right? Because we had a couple, like a day ago or 2 days ago, Kevin Durant came up and said, hey, my time as a basketball player on the court, it's not going to be something that lasts forever. So I want to play as many minutes as possible. And he mostly said that. Steve Nash said it too, because when we asked him before the Bulls game, because it was the second game of back-to-back, we asked him, we're like, hey, is there any minutes restrictions going on? Like, what's the kind of, how is he going to play in this game? And Steve Nash said, hey, this guy's got an intense passion for the game of basketball. He doesn't want to play without restrictions. He's not going to play without restrictions. We're going to find little pockets of rest for him in between games, but every single game it's been in the mid-30s, high 30s in minutes. So when you look at that, you gotta evaluate it this way. This is the most minutes he's played since he's torn his Achilles, right? It's back in 2019. And then the other way is, okay, he's producing at a very high clip. If he has an off day, mostly the Nets are guaranteed a loss. And is this going to be something that's manageable in the middle of the season heading into the playoffs? So you have all those type of kind of little debates that you could have. I'm not really a fan of him playing that many minutes, but at the same time, if they do kind of lower that amount, the Nets are putting themselves at a disservice, because then now they're going to lose games because of how Harden's playing, how the team has played without KD kind of having that really massive role on him. So, it is worrisome. I wish that they could find little more pockets of rest. They've done that in the beginning of second quarters, held him out for at least six minutes, for 5 minutes, and then they put him back in. That also stressed the importance of having a strong start with this Nets teams. It gives them superstars a little more pocket of rest. But, it is concerning, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit. We got people watching us live on YouTube who are saying Harden needs to get slapped. I see you, Guillermo. People are frustrated about what is being put on KD here. But I think when you also look at this, right, when we're talking about the star players, and that's always what it's going to be with the Nets, right? We're going to talk about that big three. We're going to talk about Kyrie and KD and James Harden. We're going to do that. But when you look at the supporting cast, you and I, we were talking a little bit about something different around Blake Griffin before we came on the show. But Blake Griffin, we've seen him get benched out of the rotation. Do you think Brooklyn's supporting cast, as is constructed right now, Do you think it's good enough, or will the team need to make upgrades to those guys who are going to support KD and Harden?
I think they're going to need an addition or two. I've always been big on getting another ball handler. I've been big on that, and and I think that's probably an avenue that they will take, or at least heavily explore when it comes to the trade deadline, just for fit purposes and needs with their with the absence of Irving. Apologies, and then overall, you got to also remember in this stretch they're still without Joe Harris. They're going to be without him for at least 4 more weeks. He had ankle surgery, which is a big void because he helps space the floor. He's an extra shooter on the floor. And at the end of the day, we know how many plays the Nets like to run for Joe Harris to really get the offense going. So the loss of Joe Harris has kind of been a big. You could kind of mostly just see them watch the games, and be like, hey, that's where they could have really needed Joe Harris. Like you could see those little pockets, and that too. You see DeAndre Bembry playing very well. I really like what he's been bringing to the team, finishing at the rim, a defender. His offensive game is starting to develop a little bit in an avenue of his game that hasn't really been highlighted, especially his previous stops, like Toronto, for example. Patty Mills has been incredible shooting the ball. Just a veteran in IQ, kind of just comes in and knows what it takes to win a championship. Been around veteran players like LaMarcus Aldridge, who's been great. But overall, it's going to be one of those things where they need that extra ball handler. Javon Carter hasn't played that many minutes as well. Blake Griffin's kind of been out of rotation. He's been in a really bad shooting slump. I think he's 0 of 39 the past, 13 games from 3. It's something like that that's really bad. So he's got to get his rhythm in.
I think they're kind of just, okay, let's use these upcoming games. Let's leave Blake to the side, use these upcoming games, try to find a big man rotation. Obviously, through that mist, you've seen that Paul Millsap has played really well, played one of his best games, if not his best game, and that's uniform of the season with the Bulls yesterday 2 days ago off the bench. So you have those little things as well, but they kind of put the whole bow on that whole answer. I don't think they have enough right now. I think they're definitely going to have to add a couple pieces.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. This time, we are just sort of now at the beginning of trade season. We talked about this the other day with Michael Scotto, December 15th, looming, where teams can really start to make moves with players who have been signed the previous offseason. So we'll see what happens to that. That's something to keep an eye on with the Nets. Now, Chris, around the Nets, and one of the times I saw you, which was at the Nets practice in the park earlier this year, that was Kyrie Irving practice with the team. We saw him there that day. We thought things might be bright and rosy. It has not turned out that way. Kyrie is not with the team. And our friend Gerard Hector has brought this up. This team, as it was constructed, you expected Kyrie to be on this team, and he's not here right now. I tend to think the longer this season goes on, Chris, and Kyrie isn't there, it's going to be harder for him to return to the team because he's not been with the guys through the trenches, through the fights of the regular season. Do you think he can return to this team? Do you think we will see him return to this team? And if he does, how does he fit in with what's going on right now?
That's the lottery question, across the whole NBA. Is Kyrie Irving going to return to this team? It's interesting because I'm on the same exact page as you. I've always been on the same page with that, and mostly on that opinion side, right? Because with the Nets, they're exploring all their options rotation-wise. They're looking what they're getting out of each of their players with certain lineups, certain rotations. We've seen all that. And by the time, say Kyrie Irving comes by in March, April, later on in the regular season and returns, all those roles are going to be solidified. And when you have a player like that jump back into a roster constructed where all their players already have finalized or cemented their roles, that's every player has to take another step back and say, okay, this is getting our new point guard rather than Harden commanding that role. So Harden's going to have to take on a shooting guard role. So you have all those little kind of pockets in between. I've never, I'm always that guy that's just, I'm always an optimistic guy. In the beginning, when we saw each other at Paxton Park, I said, hey, they may find a little solution in between here. He may play away games, which wasn't the case, or he might actually, just get the shot and start playing again. I've always remained on that spectrum, I guess you could say. But as time goes on, that spectrum is slowly decreasing. I don't think how it's looking right now. I think, and obviously we all knew the major, I guess you could say, silver lining would be, okay, maybe the mandate would get changed so he doesn't have to kind of follow these new mandate rules, right? But as that's going on, it doesn't look like that's going to change either. So it really comes down to, is he going to get vaccinated or not?
Right.
So can he return to the team if he gets vaccinated? Of course he can. I think they'll definitely welcome him with open arms. But, it's just going to be that fit, because you got the culture fit. Then you got on top of that, you got the chemistry. Everyone's got to take another step back. Like I said, then the point guard situation, Harden going to stay in that point guard role and have Irving thrive in that 2 guard, or is Irving going to go to the point and have Harden doing the 2 guard? So you got all those as well. So it's not going to be as smooth as everyone thinks of saying, "Hey, Kyrie's going to be the savior of the Nets here." It depends when he comes back. Because if he comes back too late, I think that they're going to have a little roadblock of forging chemistry right before the postseason hits.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. That matters. That chemistry matters when somebody comes back. Also, teammates looking at you. Hey, you haven't been here. You haven't been all in. I think all that matters, and it's definitely something to keep an eye on. With that being said, just the other day, a good friend of the show, Ian Begley, had reported the Nets were still listening and listening to trade calls for Kyrie Irving. Not saying that they were necessarily willing to trade him, but they are listening to that. Do you think that trading Kyrie is a serious option for the Nets here? And is that best for the team and the team's future going forward?
I've always liked the Nets' approach of taking calls, right? Because there's no harm done with taking calls. Because at the end of the day, when you have a player that's not playing and you're the Nets and you're a championship contender with James Harden and Kyrie and Kevin Durant on this team, the window of opportunity is closing. You don't have that many years to get a championship and deliver the franchise's first championship ever, right? So when you have a player like Kyrie Irving that's on the shelf and can't play, and obviously his trade value is very low, that's no secret. And on top of that too, when you listen to trade offers, you don't know what you're going to get. And I've always been one of those people that have done it this way. If they know that Kyrie Irving is not going to return this year, and would you take the spectrum saying, okay, do I want to have Irving on the shelf for the remainder of this year, even postseason, or should we trade something, even though it might not be the best look organizationally wise and culturally wise, based on what Brooklyn has built these past couple of years? Do you want to take that risk, or do you want to take that? Because at the end of the day, if you trade Kyrie Irving, you get a player. You don't know what type of player you could get back, but at least the player that they could get back fits the needs of the team that's currently constructed, like we were just talking about. And that too is like, I've always been an approach. The Nets could obviously gauge a lot of interest if they start becoming more aggressive, maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the trade deadline, which I think is February 10th, because that's when teams start to get a little more aggressive and a little more anxious for pieces before everything just starts falling like a waterfall and everything starts coming out. So is he a serious option? I wouldn't put it as a serious one right now. I don't think that they're completely in on trading for him, but at the same time, there's no damage done by taking calls for Kyrie Irving and seeing kind of what his market value stands at.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with taking those calls at all. And like you said, a good GM is always looking to improve their team, right? And if
Exactly.
they can, they will, especially with the fact that they're trying to win now. With that being said, Chris, we know the Nets are trying to win now. We know as they constructed this team with the 3 stars that they are trying to win now. Our friend Gerard Hector, the last episode, he said, look, I'm not necessarily sure that the Nets are championship contenders right now, because as currently constructed with James Harden, with Kevin Durant, and the stress that's being placed on those 2 stars to score, and the, some of the issues that have been there with the supporting cast, he wasn't necessarily sure about that. So I have to ask you the same question, Chris. Do you think the Nets, as they are right now, 16-7 atop the Eastern Conference, are they championship contenders?
I'm on the same page as our boy Gerard. I don't think they're championship contenders, honestly. They are championship contenders, but I don't think they're very strong championship contenders for how it currently is, right? I guess that's the perfect way of I guess summing it up. Because we've seen what happens when they throw good defenses at certain stars, right? We've seen the boxing one against the Warriors, what they did with Kevin Durant and James Harden, completely shut them down. Then you have that responsibility around their role players to really carry a load and act and kind of attack by committee and score by committee just to supplement that Kevin Durant or James Harden's having that off day. It usually doesn't go as planned. That's usually what happens when they get off the slow starts. That's another thing. They get off the slow starts and then they're playing downhill throughout the whole game. And they may cut it to 5 or 6 between like the third quarter and the fourth quarter, kind of getting in those tail end minutes. But then the other team gets hot, they start making shots, and then they pull out with the win. So, to sum it up as a whole, I don't think they are contenders. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't think that they're strong contenders in the Eastern Conference. I would put Milwaukee over them. I really like how they I've always been a really big fan of the Heat being big sleepers. I've always liked that pickup of Kyle Lowry, and I really like Kyle Lowry on that team. And at the end of the day, too, like Dexter, like you noted right there, when Kevin Durant's carrying such a high load and James Harden's carrying such a high load, like we talked about a little earlier ago with the minutes, when those minutes start to add up progressively throughout this whole season with no rest on second legs of back-to-backs, no rest days here, and they just keep coming, by the postseason end, you don't know how these guys are going to look, especially when you are probably not going to have Kyrie Irving.
Yep, wear and tear, something to
Yep.
worry about for sure. But we talked about, the recent loss to Chicago, talked about the inconsistency, looked great last week against the Knicks, having that closeout victory at home. Now Brooklyn's going to go on a 4-game road trip. 4 games on the road. This is what they got, Chris. At Dallas on Tuesday, back-to-back with Houston. In Houston, then they go to Atlanta and to Detroit. This is a 4-game trip. I think watching the NBA for a long time, sometimes it's good to get away from home. Sometimes teams unite, bond even stronger on the road. How important do you think this 4-game road trip is for the Nets and what we can see them do going forward into the month of December?
I think it's very good for this team because this team has done very well on the road this year. They're 8-2, I believe, which leads the league in a road record so far this year. And on top of that, when you look at these games, you got Dallas tomorrow, which is going to be. I think that's going to be great. I think that's going to be a really good game to watch. Then you got Wednesday against the Rockets. I believe that this is the first game that Harden comes back to Houston with with mostly full capacity fans allowed in the Toyota Center. So that's going to be fun to watch too. Obviously, when he came there first, you got a little mixture of boos between the limited fans that were in attendance, but it's going to be interesting to see there. Then you got then mostly ended off with the Hawks, which is they're always the team that does damage against Brooklyn. So can they really perform against them? And then you have Detroit, who obviously we know the history there. It was a very gritty game, and even dating back to last year, they suffered that really big 20-point loss that really turned their season around. And that's when things started to really roll out. So you have that as well. So, it's going to be interesting to see how they really command on this 4-game road trip. They've been really great, like I said before, 8-2. Plus, that's when they really learn a lot about themselves. You always hear them after the games talking about, hey, this was a great step in getting in the right direction. We really grew our continuity here. We really grew our game rebounding here. There's different elements that you see there. Because dating back to the Chicago game too, you could tell that this team, especially Harden and KD, they put a special emphasis on the next couple games coming up. Because they said, hey, we did all the right things we did in Chicago. We out-rebounded them. We scored on second chance opportunities. They even set a season high in that category. They dished the ball. They limited turnovers. But at the end of the day, the shots just didn't fall. So they want to carry over all those good things into this game against the Mavericks.
We'll see if they can continue some of the good habits that we saw with them against Chicago on the road. It's so weird, Chris. We're talking about a team that is 16-7.
I know. It's so weird.
First place in the conference, but it's expectations that's placed on them along with everything I think that's gone on with Kyrie Irving that has kind of caused that. But sounds to me like you think the Nets will be fine. The Nets will be fine. The Nets fans will be okay, right? Everybody will be fine.
They'll be okay. They'll be okay. As long as Harden starts to look like himself, I'm a big game marker. I know our boy Brian Fonseca, he knows this too. Yes. I'm always a big game mark. And by that game 50 mark, if Harden's not really looking really too sharp, then that's when I would be very concerned.
See, there you go, Chris. Time to tell the fans. Don't panic. Don't panic
early. Yet.
It can get late, or it can get late early, but let's not panic yet. We don't have to do that. That is Chris Milholen. Please catch his work on Nets Daily. If you're a Nets fan out there, you don't know about the Nets Daily, it is the best fan site out there. Some talented writers, great content creators. Follow Chris. Also, check out his podcast, the Wingspan podcast. I've been a guest on the podcast with our guy, Doug Beard. You've seen him. He was on the Sports Walk as well, too. So Chris and Doug do a great job with that. Chris, first time on the NBA Exchange. I want to thank you so much for coming on, man. I appreciate you. Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Man, this was a blast. Thank you so much again, Dexter, for having me on. I hope all is well with you and yours. And I'll definitely see you soon. We've always been running into each other in these little pockets of events and stuff. So we'll definitely see each other soon. So stay well till then.
That's right, man. We will see each other soon. Thank you again. Keep up all the great work with the Nets. Appreciate you, brothers. Appreciate you. That is Chris Milholen, as I said, from Nets Daily. Once again, go check out his work. Go give him a follow. We are going to take a short break. When we come back, this is a bit of a tighter episode that we're doing today. I'm going to talk to you about my NBA picks for tonight. I'll give you those when we come back on the NBA Exchange. Some are always looking for more sports content, and among the glut of sports media, some are looking for sports content that dives a bit deeper and doesn't just stick to sports. So check out Backpack Broadcasting's original long-form sports journalism series, Sideline Stories. The award-winning original series takes viewers directly into underrepresented communities within the world of sports. It's a series that goes beyond traditional sports reporting, like box scores and statistics, presenting exclusive stories that you won't find anywhere else. With a diverse group of correspondents, the series provides interviews and interesting stories around the world of sports, because there is so much beyond the game, and so much that occurs off the field or court that impacts each of us and the world we live in. Giving a voice to athletes, coaches, fans, and everyone involved in athletics, Sideline Stories looks to push sports storytelling further than ever before. It's a winner of the 2020 Independent Shorts Awards, and all episodes of Sideline Stories are available for viewing today on Backpack Broadcasting's YouTube channel and Facebook page. The Sports Walk is back. Watch Season 4 of Backpack Broadcasting's original, award-winning web series that brings you the opinions of real sports fans in these streets, literally in these streets. The first 3 seasons and current season, with new episodes every Monday, are available now on the Backpack Broadcasting YouTube channel. Check out the 2017 NYC WebFest official selection and see what other sports fans have to say on the hottest issues in sports today. It's easy, y'all. Just take the Sports Walk. All right, welcome back to the NBA Exchange. Your host, Dexter Henry. Such a great conversation we had about the Brooklyn Nets with Chris Milholen. If you guys missed that and just are tuning in now, you can catch that archived anywhere on the Backpack Broadcasting YouTube channel. Also, the podcast version of this episode will be out shortly after we are done live, so we always encourage you guys to check that out as well. Thank you for those watching live and commenting. We absolutely appreciate you, but we're going to close this show out with some NBA picks. Come on. You know how it is. We know some of you out there looking to make a little bit money off these NBA games, and we try to help you do well. I just give a little bit of my insight, what I think you should do with these picks. You know how I do. Every time we do this, 3 games that I think are worth you taking a look at in terms of picking, where I think you can get some pretty good value and, not do anything too ridiculous. First game of the night, got the Atlanta Hawks versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, when I talk about these games tonight, this is all about teams bouncing back for me tonight. This is going to be a little bit of a theme with my picks here tonight. It's all about teams bouncing back. Now, the first game, the Hawks versus the Timberwolves. These are both teams coming into this game with 2-game skids. Atlanta just lost a really tough one that I think many people thought they should have won. They played the Charlotte Hornets, and the Hornets have 4 players, including LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, who are out due to COVID protocols, and they still were able to beat the Hawks. So that was not a good loss for the Hawks. Great win for the Hornets, not good for the Hawks. And the Timberwolves, they've been skidding a bit too after they've started playing a bit better. After a sluggish start, they've been playing better, but now they're on this 2-game skid. Hawks on the road, they are 2.5-point underdogs. I'm a little bit shocked about this with the line. I know the Hawks have some injuries that we know about. We've talked about Bogdanovich out, of course, but I still think they're the better team here. I just still don't trust Minnesota, even at home. I think the Hawks bounce back. Nate McMillan was not proud of the defensive effort against the Hornets, who actually are a fantastic offensive team, but he was not happy about his Hawks effort. I think the Hawks bounce back here. Now, if you have some trepidation because you're telling me, hey, Dex, look, this is a back-to-back for the Hawks on the road. I'm not really sure how they do this here. I just still think they're a better team. I think they're motivated. The Hawks have played a little bit later after they've also had a slow start. I think they bounce back here. And look, I like the odds for them to just, to cover here. Give me the Hawks plus the points. I like it. I think they're able to get it done. You look at the money line for the Hawks here. It is not amazing, but it's some decent value that you can get on the money line with the Hawks. I say take a look at it. I think it's worth it. Take the Hawks if you want to take them, just plus the points to win. I think that's great too. But I like the Hawks here, plus 2.5 on the road. Don't think you can go wrong with their BetMGM has them at plus 125 on the money line. If you feel good about them outright winning, which I personally do, just take them plus the 125. Not bad there at all. Give me the Hawks plus the points on the road against the Minnesota Timberwolves. All right, second game of the night. Talked about the top a little bit. The streak ended for the Phoenix Suns. Some other teams have been streaking that we did not think were going to streak. That was ended by the Warriors on Friday night. And what was the second time those teams played this week? They will play a third time on Christmas, which I am very excited to see. Now, the Spurs, they're streaking. They've won 4 in a row, including a win over the team that beat the Suns on Friday, which is the Golden State Warriors. They beat them on Saturday. So very impressive there. All right. However, look, guys, this is where I think it ends for the Spurs. They've looked well. They've looked good. The Suns are 7.5-point favorites at home. They have not played since Friday. They are well rested. I think they bounce back here. Chris Paul, after that loss to the Warriors on Friday, talked about the fact that he would like to start another streak. I think the Suns automatically go and do this. Give me the Suns minus 7.5 to cover. I think they would easily here against the Spurs. I think the Spurs are able to keep this close in the first half, but then the Suns are just able to pull away. It's too much. I don't care if they have Devin Booker. They're just too much for that they have on offense. They're too good defensively. We've seen how good their defensive effort could be against the Warriors. We saw that last Tuesday. Give me the Suns to cover here easily, minus 7.5 points. I like them. Bang the Suns here to cover. Feel really good about that. My third and final game of the night involves some connection here between all these teams. Involves the Golden State Warriors. They are home hosting the Orlando Magic, and the Magic, not one of the better teams in the NBA as we have known, but they do play hard. However, Golden State talked about how they lost on Saturday to the Spurs. They're not happy with that. When Golden State loses in their losses this year, they've always bounced back and have had a blowout the next night. Average margin of victory after a loss, 20.3 points. I like that to happen again here. Maybe they don't get to 20, but the line is high. Odds makers think here, BetMGM, they've got them at minus 14.5-point favorites. And I think they're just so good. Now, with the Warriors, I think against mediocre to bad teams, you're going to see a lot of big lines. We're going to see this throughout the season just because of how well they've played on both sides of the ball. The Magic are not a good offensive team. We know that they struggle to score. The Warriors are a very good offensive team. They're top 5 in adjusted defensive rating and offensive rating. So we know how good of a team they are right here. Yeah, I see them winning by 15 or more points. I'll take that. Give me the Warriors winning by 15 or more points. I told you what I think about how their ability to bounce back. The numbers prove it. They've bounced back after losses, winning by 20.3 points a game. I think they get it done here. A blowout victory over the Magic at home. Steph Curry goes nuts. Give me the Warriors to win, covering the minus 14.5. So give me Atlanta outright on the road against the Timberwolves. Give me the Suns to cover the 7.5 points at home against the Spurs, who will see their 4-game winning streak come to an end. And give me the Warriors blowing out the Magic. I see it happening. Can't be taking the Magic here. If you're taking the Magic, which have great odds in the money line, you're seeing something that I just do not see right now. Sorry, just can't see it at all whatsoever. Those are my picks for tonight. That'll put a bow on this show. Coming up on Wednesday, we'll be talking a lot more in the world of hoops. Gerard Hector, as usual, will be joining us for NBA with Nuance. I'm sure we will have a lot of good stuff to talk about. Thank you to my guest, Chris Milholen of Nets Daily. Again, please check out his work and the fantastic work that they do over there at Nets Daily, as we appreciate that so much. Also, give the NBA Exchange a follow. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the NBA Exchange. We encourage you to do that as well. And if you want to know how to support the NBA Exchange, take a look in the comments below of the description of the show or on this podcast, and you can give us a donation to our Patreon page that supports not only this show, but also all the other great content that we produce at Backpack Broadcasting. So for this episode of the NBA Exchange, I'm Dexter Henry. And until next time, y'all, be safe, be well, enjoy the basketball, and peace.